Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, everyone, and it's delightful to see a large gathering here this evening. Thank you very much for your presence. This, of course, is perhaps a testament to the importance of this annual lecture, which was begun in July 2003, the year that Geoffrey Bawa passed away, to commemorate his birthday. It has now become a hallmark in the architectural calendar here in Colombo, and over the years, we have had many distinguished speakers, including Kengo Kuma, Marina Tabuzam, Makwewe, Tatiana Bilbao, Abba Lamba, Kerry Hill, Sumaya Wali, Anupama Kundu, and many others. The lecture is an opportunity to hear about the practice of an architect or architects based outside of Sri Lanka, in their own words, and maintain the ethos of Geoffrey's vision for the Trust as an institution that furthers and fosters the disciplines of art, architecture, and ecology. This year, we are thrilled that one of these architects is indeed from Sri Lanka originally. We're delighted that tonight's lecture will be followed by a special event tomorrow, organized specifically for young architects and architecture students, where Ravi and Frank will hold an informal discussion about their work. The session is part of the Trust's deep commitment to work closely with the architectural community and to reflect upon research and ultimately engage with our built environment through multiple modes of practice. Before I invite our Chief Curator, Shari De Silva, to introduce Ravi and Frank, I want to conclude this welcome address by thanking Mr. Miles Young, who has ever, for more than 20 years, supported this lecture. Thank you, Miles. I know you're not here, but it's been a great pleasure to have your support for this. And of course, I need to thank our media partners, the Daily Mirror and the Sunday Times. And of course, all of you once again for being here this evening. Thank you very much, and over to you, Shari.
Thank you, Channa. Tonight's lecture will be delivered by two speakers, Ravi GuneWardena and Frank Escher, who share a practice, Escher GuneWardena Architecture. As we all know, the practice of architecture is always the work of many, and we look forward to their joint presentation this evening. Additionally, as Channa mentioned, Ravi, as you may have surmised from his name, is originally from Sri Lanka, and it is always such a pleasure when we're able to celebrate the achievements and work of someone from this small island. Ravi GuneWardena studied architecture at California State Polytechnic University, Pomona, and art history in Florence, Italy. He has served on the Hollywood Public Art Advisory Panel for LA and is currently the director of the Los Angeles branch of the Sogetsu School of Ikebana. Frank Escher trained at the Federal Institute of Technology at ETH Zurich. He is the editor of the monograph John Lautner Architect and serves on the boards of the John Lautner Foundation, the Julius Shulman Institute, and the Los Angeles Forum for Architecture and Urban Design. Their practice, Escher GuneWardena Architecture, has undertaken an extraordinary range of work, including small, conceptually rigorous projects to ecologically and socially innovative urban design proposals. Frank and Ravi's interest in contemporary art has led to collaborations with artists such as Sharon Lockhart, Mike Kelly, Olafur Eliasson, and Stephen Prina. They have worked on the exhibition installation design of dozens of exhibitions in American and European museums, including the Jeweled Isle, Art from Sri Lanka at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA, in 2018, for which they were also curatorial advisors. Escher GuneWardena's work on historic structures includes the restoration of Richard Neutra's Lovell Health House, John Lautner's Chemosphere, as well as his personal residence, Gregory Ains' Green Residence, Paul R. Williams' personal residence, and A. Quincy Jones's historic Pilot House, as well as the Phase 1 restoration work of the world-famous Eames House. Their approach is to preserve as much of the original fabric of any historic structure, keeping subtle traces of historic wear, while restoring and conserving the building for prolonged use through future generations. They have collaborated with various organizations including the LA Conservancy, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and the Getty Conservation Institute. Escher and GuneWardena have been visiting professors at Cal Poly Pomona, the University of Oregon, and the Federal Institute of Technology. Clocks and Clouds, a monograph of the firm's work, was released by Berkhauser in 2017 in conjunction with their retrospective exhibition at the Art, Design and Architecture Museum at the University of California, Santa Barbara that same year. Once again, we are thrilled to have these speakers with us, and following their talk, our speakers will take a few audience questions. We just also wanted to remind everyone to turn their phones onto silent or turn them off. And please join me now in welcoming Ravi and Frank to the stage.
Thanks, Shari, for the lovely introduction. We also thank Chan Daspatha and Shari De Silva and all the Bawa Trust for this invitation to be speakers of this year's Geoffrey Bawa Memorial Lecture. And it's our distinct pleasure and great honor to be included among the group of distinguished speakers in your series. It's also especially touching to be in a room surrounded by colleagues, friends, and family, and being recognized in the land of one's birth is humbling and overwhelming. I also want to mention thanks to my cousin Nimal and his wife Jayanti for connecting us many years ago through Dominic Sansoni to Geoffrey Bawa on our first visit to Lunuganga many years ago. We have been long admirers of Mr. Bawa's work, and with him being Sri Lanka's most famous architect, he has loomed over the formation of my career since my teens. And Frank and I have also been visiting with him. Frank and I have also been visiting his projects for decades and promoting the recognition of Mr. Bawa's work abroad and in the US. Okay. In 2016, we brought this group of architecture professors and students from the ETH Zurich on a tour of about 15 Bawa projects scattered throughout the island, and including some scavenger hunts, which involved a few places off the main road, involving buses, tuk-tuks, and long hikes to find the place. But it was all worth the trek. In December this year, we will be leading a tour for the Society of Architectural Historians, a US-based historic research and preservation organization that is keenly interested in this tour of Sri Lanka. In collaboration with Quickshaws, we'll be touring ancient, colonial era, and modern architecture for 15 days throughout Sri Lanka.
A few years ago, in a monograph about our work that was mentioned, entitled To Clocks and Clouds, and I will explain the title a little bit later, the American architectural historian Paulette Singley compared our work to a catoptric box. We had no idea what that was. But in the Renaissance, catoptric boxes were pieces of furniture that contained small compartments that were either rectangular or wedge-shaped, and they were mirrored. And in each of these compartments, one would set up a small vignette. So there would be either a landscape, there would be an interior, there would be an urban scene or a mythological scene. And these different vignettes formed a cohesive whole. And Singley uses the catoptric box as a metaphor to explain the disparate types of projects we do that coexist in our office. There are new buildings, projects related to art, and projects related to history. To further illustrate the different scales of our projects, we showed also in this monograph, Clocks and Clouds, all of our projects drawn at the exact same scale. These are just a few sample pages, so there are small projects like houses, but then there's also larger projects that are museum, or this is a school or another museum. This broad range of projects, including art and history, reflects two things. On one hand, it reflects Ravi's and mine range of interests, but it also reflects a very specific cultural topography that exists in Los Angeles. Allow me, before we talk about our own work, to speak for a few minutes about Los Angeles. The city is, as you probably know, relatively young, which means it was developed at the end of the 19th, early 20th century, when most cities in Europe or other cities in America were practically uninhabitable unless you came from a certain socioeconomic class. There was population explosion, there was not enough infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And all ideas that were developed in the late 19th and early 20th century to deal with the problem of the contemporary city were found their way to Los Angeles. These were ideas like Unwin's Garden City. These were ideas about strict zoning laws. You live here, you work over there. These were ideas about decreasing density. And these were also ideas about what is known as the linear city, which is an idea that was proposed in 1882 by a Spanish urbanist, Soria Imata. And in the linear city, what you have is a sort of strand of infrastructure, and you develop a city adjacent to this. And so this strand of infrastructure could be a train, could be electricity, could be water, and then you would develop the city alongside. And what happened in Los Angeles is that railroad companies would buy land very inexpensively. They would install a railroad line, electricity and water, and then they would be able to sell the land at an enormous profit. The result of this was that in the course of very few decades, we had kilometers of these linear cities snaking through the Southern California landscape. It is important to remember that Los Angeles was developed not as a car city, but as an urban train city. And in the 1920s, Los Angeles, in fact, had the world's largest urban train system. But what is interesting about Los Angeles is also that there is what we call a tradition of experimenting. These were socio-political experiments, these were artistic experiments, and this led to a great collection of important 20th century architecture. There were people like Frank Lloyd Wright, who came to Los Angeles and built there. People like Rudolf Schindler, who came to work with Frank Lloyd Wright and built his own house. Richard Neutra, who came in 1925, so exactly 100 years ago. This is his own house that he built. Later, after the war, there are projects like the Case Study House program, where ideas of residential architecture were being explored, and it was really with the eye towards creating as much housing as possible, always with the idea that these would be single family, and there's a whole conversation that one can have around that, or a house that we will speak about later, the Lovell Health House. But this interest in experimenting also led to Los Angeles being today one of the great centers of contemporary art. And the art market is maybe still in New York, but art production has actually shifted to Los Angeles. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this range of projects, including art and history, it reflects our own interests, but it reflects what Los Angeles is about. So we will speak about these three groups, and we will first talk about some of the new buildings. Without going into too much detail, an overview, these are some residential projects that we did, the three at the top. The one at the bottom left is a housing project we did for the Episcopal Church. It is a 50-unit housing project next to a existing church. And on the bottom right, a school. I showed you the plan a second ago. What we want to talk about in more detail are three projects. So this is actually the very first house that we did when we started our practice. It was for a young expat Sri Lankan family, Bryce and Rochelle Jamie, who came to us with a impossibly steep piece of land. And the challenge there was to figure out how to build on this land without destroying it. And we, with the help of a structural engineer, very quickly developed the idea of essentially having a table in this hillside, two towers that carry a platform. The building was then slowly developed through sketches, and the building is on the uphill side attached via a bridge to the hill. But to speak about this in a little bit more detail, the two towers contain all of the infrastructure. Heating, cooling is in the towers, water supply, electricity is in the towers, the sewer lines are in the towers, as are the rainwater drains. The two towers then carry two 28-meter-long steel beams on which rests a wooden platform. Wood is the predominant method of construction in Southern California. The house is then quite simply framed. It consists of solid walls or floor-to-ceiling windows, and the whole house, the walls and the underside are clad with a cement board panel, because it's of course very difficult to access to do any kind of maintenance. In section, you can see again the tower and the two steel beams. I don't think I have a pointer here, and I don't know. And then the house, which is organized around a series of volumes. Those are the shaded areas. They contain bathrooms or storage. And on the upper side, facing the hill, are a series of bedrooms, while on the lower side, on the plan, facing the view, are four spaces that connect to one long 28-meter long space. That is from left or from right to left, the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, and what we call the family room. So this is a view from the dining room towards one of the bedroom areas and window in the back, and from one end of the house to the other, looking across the dining area. The kitchen would be further back, and then the family room back there. And we did this to make the fairly small house appear larger than it is by connecting these different spaces together.
So going forward, a span of about 20 years, this was a house that we completed just before the pandemic. It's called the House of Seven Screens. It's a home we developed for an interior designer and her family. And she was of Armenian, Middle Eastern origin. And one of her requests was that we incorporate some sort of element of from architecture of the region. And she was thinking maybe sort of decorative lamps or something like that. But we chose the mashrabia, the traditional privacy screens that you find in Arabic and Islamic architecture, and abstracted it to a form that I'll explain a bit later. The property has views in all directions, and which we wanted to offer to the inhabitants of every room. There were various setbacks from the property line. which ended up creating this leaf-shaped plan. In order to have the perimeter glass of all of glass, it was important to keep a veranda on all the sides to keep the glass from being heated during the summer months. And together with the Egyptian American engineer Andrew Nasser, a longtime collaborator of the architect John Lautner, we developed this system of steel screens which would carry the weight of the roof and provide lateral resistance from earthquakes, what we call shear walls. And it also made the entire perimeter free so that it could be glass and have the views. The interior walls would be conventional load-bearing walls. And so the plan shows the sequence of entry starting from the top. You come to the motor court and you go through a passage to an inner court, like the medulla, and then through to the main living spaces. And children's rooms are on the east side, and a library and the parents' rooms are on the west. The depth of the veranda was carefully calibrated to the angles of the sun to avoid heating up in the summer. The mashrabia itself, rendered in steel and reduced to the fewest number of lines necessary structurally, is the main structural element of the house. The inner walls and roof are conventional American wood construction. And here you see the cool shadows offering respite from the summer heat of Southern California. And the completed house is a beautiful play of shadow and patterns which interplay with the reflections in the glass. And this is looking into the living areas and looking out towards the view. We're going to then switch over now to a couple of institutional projects. One is a meditation center in the foothills of the Angeles Mountains. It's located on the site of a former Vietnamese Buddhist forest-dwelling monastery. This project was developed for a Sri Lankan client on a 100-acre mountain property along a river. It's located about half an hour east of Los Angeles. The site has a much more ancient history. Before the arrival of the Spaniards in California in the 16th and 17th century, this region along the San Gabriel River would have been settled by the indigenous people of the Tongva tribe. And much of the land is a nature conservancy, now controlled by 4 different jurisdictions, with about 10 acres of terraced ground near the river, which became, about 100 years ago, an avocado farm. And a few structures also remain from the previous Buddhist monastery that was on the site, that was built in the 1970s by the newly arrived Vietnamese community. And there were some statues and a boat tree that the sellers asked us to maintain, which of course we would want to in any case. The program for the new owner was to have a non-denominational meditation center, an education site, some retreat dormitories, a cafe, a cultural center for the Sri Lankan community. The legal entitlement process is still underway. As you know, these kind of projects take many years to get off the ground. But in developing the project, our goal was to disturb the existing terrain as little as possible and to work with the existing terracing of the land. And inspired by historic sites like the gardens of Sigiriya and Arankale, we referenced these places to convince our client to save as many of the trees and natural features and nestle the project among these existing elements. We plan to use one material throughout, a light-colored concrete for all the structures, and introduce a few abstracted historic features cast in concrete familiar to the Sri Lankan community. This is the meditation hall, and there's also a dance academy, the building on the right, where Bharatanatyam, Kandyan, and modern dance and music will be taught. The central axis, sorry, these are slightly out of order, would be a weekend farmers market with local produce and so forth. And so these are various views of the campus and a night view.
So from these few, what we call new projects, we move on to art projects. Again, we want to show you just very quickly a few examples without going into too much detail. The project at the top left, which is actually the first house that we showed you, the house on these two towers, was a project with the Icelandic artist Ólafur Elíasson. Some of you may know his work. He did a fantastic installation at the Tate Modern years ago that sort of put him on the map. And in that installation, he sort of installed a large semicircle as the sun in the turbine hall. Here he was proposing to attach a 120-foot diameter, that's about 40-meter diameter sun to the house. The city basically freaked out. They said that we could not do that. And so the project was changed to be an installation of sculpture and light installations on the inside of the house. The image at the top in the center is a collaboration with the American conceptual artist Mike Kelly. This was a project we did in Germany for the Münster Skulpturenprojekte. This is every 10 years an international exhibition of sculptures that happens throughout the city. Top right is a project we did in Vienna, Austria, with the artist Stephen Prina, recreating all of the built-in furniture of two Schindler houses that no longer exist. On the bottom, just a few examples of exhibition design. The one on the left and the right are actually both with the Kemper Museum in St. Louis. The one on the left is a history of modern architecture in St. Louis. The one on the bottom right is an exhibition that came originally from the Getty, and it was about what they called images of war of images, which was how images were used during World War I in Europe to convey certain messages. And the image in the center at the bottom is an exhibition that we curated for the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles on architectural follies. And the whole exhibition was organized around an architectural folly of our own design. But for about 20 years, we worked with the American artist Sharon Lockhart. And so these are some examples of projects we did with her. The top left is an exhibition in Vienna at the so-called Secession building. The one in the center is at the Venice Biennale. She was invited to the Polish pavilion there. Top right is an exhibition in Spain. And the two images at the bottom are from the most recent collaboration, which was a series of films she did on the Israeli dancer Noah Eshkol. And the bottom right is we designed some sets for one of these film things. But the two projects, we want to talk about two projects in more detail. One is this Blum and Poe gallery. We have in Los Angeles dozens, if not hundreds, of abandoned or underused buildings, industrial buildings, commercial buildings, some dating from the late 19th century, some from the first half of the 20th century, some even post-war. And this project was really about an adaptive reuse, how one can reuse an existing industrial building that is no longer used for manufacturing. In this case, we were able to take out floors in the very large space. We had to install additional steel structure to carry the roof but it was really about creating large spaces in this volume. There were various windows, you can see them in the back, that we didn't need, so we just covered them in concrete, and other places where we needed windows, we cut them into these concrete block walls and created a large concrete frame and then just painted everything white. The plan is quite simple. It is from right to left. There's offices. Then there is a layer of bathrooms. And then there is a layer that is really sort of the entrance space that connects parking in the back to the main entrance, which is on the street on the front. The yellow part is all of the galleries. And you see this sort of little white space that connects the entrance into the galleries, which is a two-story space, and I'll show this to you in an image in a second. That is where the two connect, the public circulation space and the galleries. And then on the far left, art storage, which every art institution or large gallery, of course, needs. On the upper level, we have from right to left, we have an additional gallery, another layer of bathrooms, offices, and then, of course, the upper levels of the gallery spaces. So on the lower level, we have the office first, then we have this space that, as I mentioned, connects the street, that's in the far end, to the entrance in the back, and then to the right, one goes into that little connecting space, a two-story space that then leads to the galleries. And what we try to do here is to not have any, or sort of minimize the amount of lighting and air conditioning and other infrastructure, and pack everything into these skylights that we cut into the existing structure, keeping some of the main beams there that continue through the skylights. And we worked with some very interesting lighting engineers to create a very balanced light for the galleries. During the day, it's all natural light. And at night, we have these different lighting systems. This was a second gallery that we did for the same galleries. Then on the second floor, there is a gallery that is very different in nature. It had an oddly shaped ceiling, so we covered that with insulation and with paper, but left the really interesting structure and the form the way it was. The exterior is also used for exhibitions. It is normally, this is the parking, but sometimes it is used for exhibitions, as is this. And Ravi will speak about an exhibition design project.
So around 2015, we were approached by a researcher and a curator named Julie Romaine to discuss an exhibition of Sri Lankan art that was in the planning phases at LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. LACMA has a sizable collection of Sri Lankan Buddhist art acquired for the museum under the previous head of South Asian art, Dr. Pratapaditya Pal. Dr. Pal was the successor to Ananda Kumaraswamy at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. So Dr. Pal had collected Hindu art from South India mostly, but for Sri Lanka, he had collected predominantly Buddhist art. And when it was revealed that the exhibition is meant to be titled Art from Sri Lanka, I asked, well, where are all the other cultures and ethnicities and religions and traditions that comprise Sri Lanka? So an effort was made to collect works to be more inclusive and representative of the cultural groups of the island. And it evolved into a very full exhibition, filling the gaps from other museums, such as the Metropolitan Museum and the British Museum, to make sure everyone was represented. At the suggestion of Foreign Minister Mangala Samaravira at the time, the exhibition date was pushed further to 2018 to coincide with the 70th anniversary of independence. About 240 objects were included in the exhibition. So it was a huge undertaking. And with the curatorial team, we came up with these thematic sections about, for example, the establishment of Buddhism in Sri Lanka, then Hindu-Buddhist encounters, the founding of Polonnaruwa, European encounters, Kingdom of Kandy, and so forth. And then overlaid into these sections were the objects themselves, these 240 objects, and then all the space had to be calculated exactly to make sure everything would fit with the sort of the spatial dignity that it should afford. So there were some elements that we used to as exhibition design elements, namely the column, the platform, like a malaka, and the mandala. And so we used these three elements in different forms and combinations. And as you find in historic sites, you would have combinations of the platform and the column and so forth. The column was, in our exhibition, was abstracted to become these segmented columns, which would also be used as markers for the different exhibition sections, section texts, and so forth. And here we see sort of the computer analysis of laying out all the objects and how they would fit. And then color was a very important aspect. And we found that the color white would sort of rob the objects of their richness, and came up with this very deep granite gray, which would enhance the viewing of the objects. And a few special objects the curators wanted to highlight, and so we chose different shades of saffron for those special objects. So there would be panels with those shades of saffron. And this is still a computer rendering, and then this is the completed works, which spanned basically about a 2,000-year history of art in Sri Lanka. And this is the room with the Hindu-Buddhist encounters, and then a section with colonial era works, and the Kandyan kingdom. And the last section was a series of photographs by Reg van Kuylenburg. And in that process, we were also able to have the archives of Reg van Kuylenburg placed permanently at the Los Angeles County Museum.
And so we come to history. Again, a sampling of projects. Top left is the house by John Lautner, and I will speak a little bit more about Lautner in a second. This is the house that he built for himself shortly after leaving Frank Lloyd Wright's employment. In the center at the top, this is the house that Paul Williams built for himself. Paul Williams was a very important African-American architect who had an extraordinary career. This is the actually second house that he built for himself, which we restored, finished this about 2 years ago. The house on the top left is a project we're still working on, a house by A. Quincy Jones, top right. Bottom left, also a house by A. Quincy Jones, so-called pilot house. It was the model for a very large development. It was built as a co-op. Center at the lower row is a project that we got through the introduction from or recommendation from the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation. This was to replace a Frank Lloyd Wright building that had burnt down in 2018. But the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation felt that that should not be rebuilt, and they recommended us to design a new house that follows the footprint and the massing of the Frank Lloyd Wright house that was lost. And the bottom right is a project that we started on recently, which is by Neutra. It's called the Shire House. Galka Shire was a very important art dealer who came from Europe to Los Angeles in the 1920s. She represented what she called the Blue Four, artists like Paul Klee, Kandinsky, Feininger, and Jawlensky. And this is the house that she built as a gallery space and as her dwelling. But the projects that we want to speak about in a little bit more detail is first this chemisphere. As was mentioned earlier, I did the first book on John Lautner, which was published in 1994, and then I was involved in setting up the John Lautner Foundation. The family then donated the archive to the foundation, and I became the administrator for the archive, which I did from 1995 until 2007, when the archive was transferred to the Getty Research Institute, where it now is. We felt it would be more accessible, it would be better cared for, frankly. But John Lautner, he apprenticed under Frank Lloyd Wright from 1933 to 38, is one of the few architects who really managed to sort of create his own architectural identity. A lot of people who studied under Wright never were able to leave the shadow of Wright. In fact, Frank Lloyd Wright said of John Lautner that he was the, I quote, second best architect in the world. This house, the Chemisphere, is from 1960, and it was one of the defining moments in Lautner's career. It's probably one of his best known houses. It sits on a very steep hill, and the structure is quite interesting. You see on the right side in the section at the bottom, there is this sort of large concrete disc which is poured into the bedrock, and it carries a 5 foot, that is about 1.50 meter column. And from that column, you have steel beams that radiate out and these steel braces, and they carry a wooden floor and also these curved wooden beams that start on the side, and they go to the center where there is a steel compression ring. So that is the skeleton of the structure. There's none of the walls inside the building are load-bearing. And then on the left, that is an elevation. The plan of the house is as follows. On the top left, you see a bridge that connects from the hill onto the house. Half of the house, the bottom part, is the public spaces, living room, dining room, kitchen, while on the side facing the hill, you have these smaller pie-shaped rooms that are bedrooms or a laundry room. So the smaller spaces all have a very intimate connection to the hill, while the living spaces, the larger spaces, have a very expansive view. So again, this is the entry. We've just come off the bridge. We're on this balcony. On the left, we go into the house. This is one of the bedrooms, or two bedrooms that you could combine. And you see how close to the hill you are on this side, while on the other side, you have this very expansive view of what is called the San Fernando Valley, which is part of Los Angeles. Then again, the glulam beams come to a steel compression ring at the center. There's a skylight there, and this is where the fireplace area is with this seating area. Now, the house had had several owners, and they all did terrible things to the house. Built-in furniture had been removed. They had put carpet everywhere, nailed into the floor. The radiant floor heating system was damaged. Surfaces were painted. To some degree, room configurations were changed. So when we started working on this house, the question for us was, do we restore this to what it was in 1961 when the house was completed? And the answer was it would not make sense because the house was not completed the way John Lautner wanted to complete it. There were shortcuts that were made during construction, for example, materials that he had to use for cost reasons. And so we decided to go back to the original drawings and make some changes to the house based on what Lautner originally wanted to do. So some of the work was a pure restoration, so removing paints, rebuilding built-in furniture, but then we also paneled walls that Lautner had wanted to panel but couldn't do at the time, and installing the stone floor that you see. So this is what the house looks like now. And a very large change that we did was to replace all of the glass with frameless glass, because the structure of the roof, these curved glulam beams, are really quite interesting. And you could not read them before the restoration because there were all these vertical lines that interfered with the kind of the main line of the structure. And this is what the house looks like at night, overlooking the San Fernando Valley. We did two additional projects which were not built. One was sort of a large pool, and the other one was a guest house that would also function as a bridge to connect from one side of the property to the other. We wanted it to have a different relationship to the ground than the main house, which is sort of lofted off the ground, while this one is sort of wedged into this ravine.
About 10 years later, we were approached by the family of Charles and Ray Eames. As you know, they were very important industrial designers, graphic designers, and Charles Eames was an architect as well, though he did a very limited number of actual buildings. The Eames House and Studio was part of the case study house program, an experimental program after the war, commissioned by the Arts and Architecture magazine that explored new techniques in both living and in building. The entire structure is framed in steel and open web joists, those things with the zigzag on the roof framing, and steel posts, which are infilled in panels of glass or in solid walls. The house and studio were carefully sited to fit into an existing eucalyptus grove. The structure was conceived to be a light frame with a thin skin, like a box kite or like a vesak kudu. The borrowing of the contents of the house's interior in, when was it? In 2011, an exhibition was planned about the Eameses, and or it was actually an exhibition on California design called Living in a Modern Way. And so because the museum borrowed these 1,800 objects from the living room, we were able to begin work on the restoration of the house itself. So these are some of the objects before they went to the museum, and you can see it's quite full. What had happened is over time, the flooring, which was a white vinyl asbestos tile, had dried up, and whenever you walked on it, it would crack and break. And asbestos, as you know, is a hazardous material. So this allowed the foundation to remove and replace the tile. A lot of work went into finding a modern material without asbestos, but had the same character, the sound, the feel, and the touch of the material. Now, there are certain things about the house that we thought we should not restore. So these are on the sliding doors of closets and so forth, which were originally metal, and then they were painted, but they had developed this beautiful crackling, which we thought is part of the history and denotes the passing of time, which should be retained. As part of the project, we also restored a lot of the glazing and the window systems throughout the house. A big, like, comprehensive survey was done of every piece of glass to determine what was original and replaced, and different types of glass and so forth. All the details for the steel window system were studied, and as you can see along the base where there were plants and water being sprayed, the windows had completely corroded and frozen shut. So that was one of the projects that we did, was to have that restored to be functioning again. Here you see before and after views of the living room floor, and of the paneling on the walls as well, the restoration of the paneling. For this project, again, there was a sort of a team of consultants, and the Getty Museum provided scientific support to study climate analysis of the building, as well as all the material testing for what was in the flooring. And an interesting feature was that no one knew what kind of wood was on this paneling, and the Getty did a microscopic analysis and compared it to several hundred species of wood, and found that it was eucalyptus, the same type of plant that was growing outside. And here are some completed views of the house.
So the last of the historic preservation projects that we want to show is a project that we have been working on for about 3.5 years and are about to complete. So this is the Lovell Health House by Richard Neutra, 1929. It is the house that launched Neutra's career. The house was included in the 1931 International Style Exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art. That was a survey of what was then this sort of new form of architecture. Neutra uses in this house many advanced techniques. I will show some of this in a second. The house had 4 owners and was in need of restoration. This is the entrance, and this is the floor plan of the uppermost level. So on the right, you see the stair that you just saw in a photo. You walk towards the house, and then you have a terrace outside of the house. It's what you see there right before you enter. And on the uppermost level, you have the bedrooms. To the right, there's a stair that goes down to the main level, which is 1 floor below, which on the north side, which is on the upper side, has from left to right a dining room, the kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. And on the south side, towards the view, there is this really fantastic space that has a space that originally was supposed to be the dining room, which never was used as such. It was part of the living room, the large living room, and the library to the right, which opens to this patio. And again, if you go down a next level, you have on the lowest level, you have the swimming pool and other spaces. Dr. Lovell was a proponent of healthy living, of healthy eating, of exercising. This was something that was very important in the 1920s. And he wrote about that extensively for the Los Angeles Times. And he commissioned this house really as a model to show how what healthy living could be. The elevation of the house and a sketch that shows the composition. Again, top floor, bedrooms, the middle level, the living space. On the right, this 2-story tall stair that connects from the entrance down. And then on the lower level, you see these columns that carry the house and they surround the pool. One of the most innovating things about this house was its steel structure, which was being used for the first time in residential architecture. This is what made the house famous. It was also well known. Neutra writes about that the steel structure was erected in 40 hours. That's 1 week. And onto the steel, the mesh was applied, and then gunite, concrete was sprayed, and that creates the shell of the house, the exterior of the house. And this is the completed house. The stair space, the entry space, as you come down, you see there Mr. Neutra sort of draped in front of the fireplace. And if you turn around from this point, you look into the living room. Again, the fireplace is now on the left. A sketch by Neutra and a photo from the 1930s of the completed house. Now, when we started working on the house, it looked like this. So there were a lot of changes that were done to the house, to surfaces, and to various built-in things. At the very beginning, we did a very careful analysis of the house. We photographed everything. We did in the archives, we studied the history of the house. We put together a very detailed timeline of changes to the house, ownership changes. We also found, among other documents, I mean, it's an extensive archive. We found this text, which is in German, where Neutra describes in great detail the house, the colors, some methods of construction, which was quite useful. We also did at the beginning a structural analysis where our engineers examined the structural system very carefully to determine what might be necessary. We found out that the concrete structure, which was engineered by Neutra himself, was in a way over-engineered, while the steel structure was actually under-engineered. But the decision was made to not make any interventions into the house, into the structure, because it would really sort of we would have to take the house apart. There were some interesting additions to the house that were not by Neutra, by a significant architect, Gregory Ain, who worked in Neutra's office, and it was commissioned by the original client. So the decision was made to maintain this particular interior. Now, one of the most interesting aspects that we did was the so-called paint stratigraphy. The house, when it was first built, it was photographed in black and white. And from 1960 on, it was always painted in white and gray and black. But we did about 130 color samples throughout the whole house, walls and ceilings, and discovered that the house originally had a very rich color palette. And this is a floor plan with the colors overlaid. You see the colors that we would have on the walls with the colors that we have on the ceiling, which really sort of revealed a much richer color palette than anyone actually ever knew. So we are about to complete this and publish this, and we have a number of Neutra experts who are already quite excited about this discovery in a way that the house was not in black and white. I mean, similar things have happened to Le Corbusier buildings where they were originally thought to be black and white, but in fact were very colorful. So these are some photos that from about a week ago. Again, we are about to complete this project, and you see here some of the details that have now been restored. These were actually originally car lights that Neutra incorporated into the building, other lights that we were able to reconstruct and restore, other areas where we were able to remove additions that had been done. And then this is what the living room looks like now with the correct colors, which is an off-white and other elements restored. In particular, the kitchen actually has a very wonderful color scheme. All the spaces that face north had shades of yellow because they have no natural light, natural sunlight. So this is what the house currently looks like. Again, it's going to be done in a few months, and then we'll have more completed photos of this. And some details of the house, this hallway that is on the lower level that actually has no natural light at all, and it had this very rich yellow, which makes the light in the space very different than if it were just a white wall, which then reads as gray. So this is what the house looks like currently. So before we end with two current projects, I first just want to explain the title, Clocks and Clouds, because we are always asked about this. And we always feel that in architecture, there are things that one can measure and things that one cannot measure. Architecture is one of these disciplines that it's never completely sure, is it a completely technical thing or is it an art? And we borrow the title Clocks and Clouds from a piece of music by the Hungarian composer Ligeti, who in turn borrowed this from a essay that the German philosopher Karl Popper wrote. And Popper argues that most things, systems or phenomena, are neither purely clocks or clouds, but fall in between. And we were very intrigued by that. But to show you just two current projects that we're working on right now in the office to end. One is a very large house on a fantastic piece of land overlooking the ocean. Our client owns this sort of middle section between those two ravines. And we placed the house following the topography. So the topography really sort of created the shape of the building. The building, there are very strict design guidelines. It has to be a one-story building, cannot be two. It has to have a sloped roof. And so this is what we did for that. The apex is this point where we have a view, and you'll see that in plan in a second. And this is the view from the far end. In plan, the green areas are atria. They are enclosed garden spaces open to the sky. And the house is organized around this atria. On the right side is the master bedroom wing and the library and office. The center is living room, dining, and kitchen around this sort of triangular atrium. And then the wing to the left is where we have guest rooms and additional rooms. As you enter, there are the screen elements. You see the view in the far distance. And as you walk, in this case, backwards into the house, you look again to this atrium right next to the entrance. You move further in, the triangular atrium that is on the left, that will have a garden. And then as you turn around, this will be the view from the main space, looking out at what is known as Catalina Island. Then moving to the west, the dining area and kitchen, and this is the kitchen. So this is one of the two projects that we wanted to show to end that we're currently working on.
So the last house is a house that we're developing of our own. And as an architect, one is often constrained by your client's wishes and so forth. But in your own home is where you would get to project your own philosophy on dwelling and so forth. And we had previously explored the notion of whether a glass house can be green or sustainable. And this was a project that we did for Dwell magazine. And so we're continuing this exploration of designing a sustainable house. And in this case, we're exploring a different kind of building technique. California has a long history of building simple houses out of adobe. It's a thick walled mud brick house, a technique developed by indigenous Native Americans, much like our wattle and daub houses. Rammed earth, poured earth are all techniques in this vein, which keep the interior temperatures stable, both cool in the summer and warm in the winter. So in this house, we're going to explore the technique of straw bale construction, in which blocks of straw are stacked and then covered in a thick plaster. I'm going to back up a bit now. So this is the site, and where all the lines are is towards the view, and which looks out to the San Gabriel Mountains in the distance, and then an area called Mount Washington, just north of downtown Los Angeles. And so this, where the red line is, and the flattish area is where the house will go. And so this helped shape the house into this kind of fan shape plan. And so you can see how thick the walls are. It's about 45 centimeters thick, and they're made of these straw bales, which then would be fireproof by covering it in concrete plaster. There are two volumes that define the central space. One is the garage, a two-car garage, and then the volume on the right is a library, and then the center area is living, dining, and kitchen, and then the two bedrooms on either end. So these are renderings of the project, and we hope to get started on the construction sometime in the near future. And so you see the thick walls of the straw bale, and an entry sequence, the central space. And this is in its sort of raw state, and of course we have collection of objects like everyone, and also paintings and art that will eventually go on the walls. And here looking back towards the street, the library looking out, and one of the bedrooms. And so with rapidly changing climate, it's imperative that we look both to the ancient and new modes for conserving building materials and the energy needed to run them, but also celebrating the beauty and simplicity of these early dwellings. So this is what we have tried to conjure in this project. And here, looking from the view side. Thank you for your attention, and we'll be taking questions now. It's difficult to see if anyone has any questions. If you'd either raise your hand or come a little forward. And
all
Can one turn the lights on, because then we can see if somebody's raising a hand, we can, because right now we're looking at it. Great, thank you. I'm sorry, you had a question. And I think there was a question over there. Yes.
having your
It depends how if the glass faces north, you don't have direct sun. And we also look at the overhangs. You can actually calculate the overhang to protect the glass from sun in the summer, but allow sun to enter when we're further north than we are here. And in the winter, it is actually desirable to have a little bit of sun come in, because it helps to warm up the house. And so it's actually a very easy calculation, or to model that, to make sure that we have sun protection in the summer when we don't want to have excessive sun, and allowing some sun in the winter.
glass deteriorate over time, as in the sort of the insulation capacity of like double glazed glass?
Well, yes, but we need glass. We have in Los Angeles. I mean, there were a lot of architects who came from Europe or from the Eastern United States who imagined that one can live outdoors in Southern California. It does get cold in the winter. It does get cold, and so having a space without any sort of glass or without any envelope would not work well in the winter.
And also these systems of double and triple pane glass and the gaskets that seal them are getting incredibly efficient. So we have installed these sort of systems in buildings that we did 25 years ago, and they're still functioning very well in keeping out heat or keeping out cold.
What is the architect going to do, client, or is protecting the house from burglars?
Maybe a dog or two.
You said you're going to put lots of things inside.
Yes.
Unless you live in a different part of the world than most of us, the burglars will want to come and get inside the building.
That is a very, very interesting question. I mean, we have really not thought so much about that, because I think we have a slightly. It's not that huge of a problem. I mean, we don't have.
In Los Angeles, you didn't have bushfires.
In this area, it really isn't.
So many of the houses that we've done for clients and so forth, depending on the neighborhood, of course, have large amounts of glass, and unlike in Sri Lanka and other parts of the world.
What you've got through the glass.
Unlike in Sri Lanka, people don't build tall walls and so forth. And so with using technology of alarm systems and so forth, and neighborhood watch, even in all of those houses that you saw that have been built, they have huge amounts of glass, but the problem is kind of addressed through.
It really isn't an issue. Yes. Are there other questions? Yes.
Could you touch a bit more
Yeah. So what I didn't mention is that the two towers sit on 4 caissons each. So those are foundations that go about 10 meters into the ground, into bedrock. And so they support the house, they anchor the house to the ground. And it really became just a matter of organizing the house and the infrastructure of the house to take advantage of these towers. So the whole heating and cooling of the house is organized into 2 different zones, the east and the west. And the towers are accessible. You go down a stair, not from the house, but on the outside. You go down the garden and you can enter the towers. And they are really used for everything that one needs to have in a house. All of the infrastructure is in there and is accessible if at some point something needs to be changed. And again, we developed the idea with a structural engineer very early in the project. So it wasn't designing the house first and then trying to figure out, well, how do we hold this up? It was from the beginning on, we developed this idea of this is what we think the most efficient way of building on this hill that does not destroy the hill. There's a house next to it that has about the same footprint that ends up having 28 caissons, and we have 8. You're welcome. Well, good. Right. Well, thank you very much.